and there will be no change in supply. And as a result, we can see that the new equilibrium price is going to be lower, and the new equilibrium quantity is going to be lower. Then in part B, we have a decrease in the price of bacon, which is a complementary product to eggs. So complementary product means that the consumers like to consume eggs and bacon together. So since there is a decrease in the price of bacon, that means that the consumers will demand more bacon. And since they like to consume eggs and bacon together, they will also demand more eggs. And that is reflected as a rightward shift of the demand curve. So we can see that when the demand curve shifts to the right, that will result in a higher price and higher quantity. Do you have any questions so far? So when we have a change in the price of a complement or substitute, that always affects the demand curve. And in this case, since the price of a complement falls, that means consumers will demand more of that complementary good, and therefore they'll demand more of the good of interest, in this case eggs. So that's why the supply shifts to the demand shifts to the right. Then in part C, we have an increase in the price of chicken feed. So in this case, chicken feed is an input into the production of eggs, because it's an input into the food of chicken, which produce eggs. So when the price of chicken feed increases, that means that it's more costly to produce a given quantity of eggs. And as a result, producers will be able to supply fewer eggs for any given price. And that will cause the supply curve to shift to the left, since we have a decrease in supply. So since the supply curve shifts to the left, we have an increase in price and a decrease in quantity. part D, Caesar salad becomes popular at dinner parties. And the dressing of Caesar salad is made with raw eggs. So, since we're given that Caesar salad becomes more popular, that means that consumers will demand more Caesar salad. And since raw eggs are an input into the production of Caesar salad, that means that also consumers will demand more eggs. So that is the change in preferences of consumers. And since for any given price they will now demand more eggs, that means that the demand curve is going to shift to the right. So the demand curve shifts to the right, and as a result, the quantity increases and the price increases. Then for part E, we have a technological innovation that reduces egg breakage during packing. So as a result of this technological innovation, producers can produce more eggs without, they can produce more eggs for any given level of inputs, since fewer eggs will be breaking. And as a result, they will be able to supply more eggs. And this technological innovation causes an increase in supply. So the supply curve is going to shift to the right. So we can see that when the supply curve shifts to the right, we now have a higher quantity and a lower price. Do you have any questions so far? So then for problem number 2, we have a market for HD TVs. Using a supply-demand graph, show what will happen to the current equilibrium price and quantity if people expect the price of TVs to fall in the future. So first of all, if people expect the price of TVs to fall in the future, that means that the price is higher now than in the future. And as a result, suppliers will want to supply more TVs right now, and consumers will demand fewer TVs right now because they will be expecting the price to drop. So they will be demanding fewer TVs now compared to the future. So when we have an expected increase in price, that means that the price today is lower than in the future. And since the price is lower today, it's expected fall in the price. So since we have an expected fall in the price, that means that the price today is higher than in the future. And since the price today is higher, that means that the consumers will demand fewer TVs. Today, and they will be waiting for the price to drop in the future in order to buy a TV. On the other hand, since the price today is higher than in the future, producers will want to supply more TVs today compared to in the future because of the higher price. So we can depict that as a shift in the supply curve and a shift in the demand curve. So because of the expected fall in the price, since today consumers will be demanding fewer TVs, that means that the demand curve is going to shift to the left because we have a decrease in demand. And also, producers will want to produce more TVs today compared to the future. So that means that the supply curve is going to shift to the right. So as a result, we can see that the new equilibrium is going to be at a lower price, but the change in quantity is going to be ambiguous depending on the relative shifts of the supply curve and demand curve. So as I have drawn it here, the quantity in the new equilibrium is going to be a little bit higher than in the old equilibrium, but it can be the other way around too.
So it can increase or decrease?
Sorry?
I mean the equilibrium quantity.
Yeah, it could either increase or decrease. So if the supply curve was shifting by less and the demand curve was shifting by more, then we would see that the quantity would decrease. In the case I've drawn it, it will increase, but it can go either way, so it's ambiguous change in quantity. But the price is going to fall for sure. Then for part B, what will happen to the price and quantity if the price of DVD players falls? And we assume that the DVD players and TVs are complements. So when the price of a complement or substitute changes, that always results in a shift of the demand curve. So in this case, we have a fall in the price of DVD players, which are a complement. So consumers will demand more DVD players, and since TVs are a complement to that, they will also demand more TVs. And that will cause the demand curve to shift to the right, since for any given price, consumers will demand more TVs now. Yeah, so we only have a shift in the demand curve because the price of a complement is changing, so that's on the demand side. And since the demand curve shifts to the right, we see that both price and quantity are going to increase. Then for part C,
I have a question about part B. Is that price down after you wrote ambiguous change in Q for, is that for part B or is that part of?
that was for part A.
Okay.
Yeah, that was for this part here.
Excuse me, for parting instead of expected, it just said the price of TV dropped. Would that shift the demand curve as well, or that wouldn't shift it?
That wouldn't shift the curve because price on the y-axis, so it will be just a movement along.
Okay. So it's because it's an expectation that it moved it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So then 2C, we observe that the price of TVs increases. Can we conclude that there has been definitely an increase in demand?
No.
Right. So yeah, it can be also a fall in supply. So pretty sure that it could be a deep increase in demand, but that's not necessarily what happened. So an increase in demand for TVs does cause an increase in price, but that can also be caused by a falling supply. An increase in price can be caused either by an increase in demand or by a fall in supply. And for problem number 3, consider the market for beer. And in part A, we just want to draw the demand and supply curve and the equilibrium. So as usual, we have quantity of beer on the x-axis, price of beer on the y-axis, and the demand for beer is downward sloping and the supply is upward sloping. And the equilibrium occurs at the intersection of supply and demand. Then in part B, the beer industry has been hit by a shortage of hops, which are used to make beer. And at the same time, consumer income has increased. So in this case, we have a shortage in an input used for the production of beer. So now it will be harder to supply any given quantity of beer. So the supply is going to decrease. And this will cause the supply curve to shift to the left. And at the same time, we have an increase in the income of consumers. And if we assume that beer is a normal good, that means that when consumers have more income, they will also demand more beer. So the demand curve is going to shift to the right because of the higher demand for beer. So we can see that the price is going to certainly increase, but the quantity can either increase or decrease, depending on the relative shifts of the supply and demand curves. So in this case, the quantity stays almost the same, but slightly, perhaps slightly increases. But if the demand curve was shifting by less and the supply curve was shifting, depending on the slopes and the relative shifts of the two curves, we can get that the quantity either increases or decreases. So depending on how we draw the picture. So the change in quantity again here is ambiguous, but the price is going to increase. So I'll just draw a case in which the quantity falls, just to illustrate. So we can see in this case, if the supply curve shifts by more to the left and the demand curve shifts by a little bit less to the right, then they will intersect at the mean equilibrium where the quantity is lower than before. So this is the opposite of this case, so it can be either way. So the shortage of an input into the production of beer causes following supply of beer because there's fewer inputs for production, and that caused leftward shift in the supply curve. And assuming that beer is a normal good, that means that higher income causes consumers to demand more beer. So therefore the increase in income of consumers causes a higher demand for beer. And that's why the demand curve shifted to the right. Do you have any questions? So then this is all for question 3. And for question 4, draw the supply and demand for low-fat organic yogurt. So again, we have the quantity of low-fat organic yogurt on the x-axis and the price on the y-axis. And we have a downward sloping demand curve and an upward sloping supply curve. And the equilibrium occurs at the intersection of supply and demand. So that's all for part A. And then for part B, suppose that the price of organic sugar, an input to the production of yogurt, increases. And also suppose that the price of granola falls. And we want to see what happens to supply and demand and to the equilibrium quantity and price. So, since we have that the price of organic sugar increases, and that is an input to the production of yogurt, that means that it's more costly to produce any given level of yogurt, and that is why the supply of yogurt is going to fall, and that causes a leftward shift of the supply curve. And we also have that the price of granola falls. And we can assume that granola and yogurt are complements. So when the price of granola falls, that means that consumers will demand more granola. And they will also demand more yogurt because they consume it together. So that will cause an increase in demand. And therefore a rightward shift of the demand curve. So to reiterate, the price of sugar increases, and sugar is an input to production. So it is now more costly to produce yogurt. And that is why the supply of yogurt falls. And the supply curve shifts to the left. And on the other hand, because the price of granola falls, and granola can be considered as a complement, that causes a rise in demand for yogurt, and that is why the demand curve for yogurt shifts to the right. So we have a rightward shift in the demand curve and a leftward shift in the supply curve, and we can see that the new equilibrium is going to be at the higher price, and again the change in quantity is going to be ambiguous. In this case,
Is that change of price ambiguous or change in quantity?
well, the new equilibrium is here and the old one is here, so therefore the price increases. And I mean, it's just like in the case where I drew here, depending on how much the supply curve and demand curve shift, the quantity can either increase or decrease. So since I still have a little bit of time, I was just going to go over, in general, what factors cause shifts in the supply curve and the demand curve. So, just to summarize. To answer all these questions, so basically, you need to know when the supply curve shifts and when the demand curve shifts. And I will just list all the factors that cause a shift in these curves. So for example, factors that cause a rightward shift in supply. That is an increase in supply. These factors are, for example, a decrease in the cost of production of goods. So a decrease in the cost of materials, labor, or other inputs used in production. So that will always cause a rightward shift in supply curve, because now it will be cheaper to produce. So producers will find it cheaper to produce any given quantity, so they will be producing more. And another factor that causes a rightward shift in the supply curve is an improvement in technology, which reduces the cost of production. Technology that reduces the cost of production. Since the supply curve reflects the marginal cost of production, when the cost of production is lower, producers will want to supply more, since it is cheaper for them to produce, and that will again cause a rightward shift in supply curve. So another factor is improvement in the weather, which is usually for agricultural products, but that is not so important, so I won't list that. But in general, also increase in number of suppliers will cause an increase in quantity supplied. Simply because when there are more suppliers in the market, there will be a higher quantity supplied, and that causes a rightward shift in supply. And also an expectation of lower prices in the future. So as we saw in the homework, when consumers expect that there will be, when individuals expect that there will be lower prices in the future, that means that the prices today are higher than in the future. So suppliers will want to supply more today relative to in the future, and that also causes a rightward shift in supply. So expectation of lower prices in the future also causes an increase in supply. So these are the main factors that affect the supply curve. And if any